companies really have to understand how conservative FDA is being in applying cybersecurity requirements to devices and really plan that testing and documentation generation, into their timeline and process for their marketing applications.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of FDA Watch. I'm Wayne Pines. I've been involved with FDA for many years. At one point, I was Associate Commissioner for Public Affairs. I've authored or edited 16 books about the agency.
And I'm Shelly Garg, the managing partner and founder of Garg Law, a full-service FDA-focused law firm. I have been on the private side advising companies on regulatory compliance and enforcement for the last 15 years, and I'm really excited to be joining Wayne at FDA Watch.
So hopefully you all subscribe to the podcast and listen to the first episode with Nikki Reeves and Brian Malkin so you know what to expect. We'll have at least 2 episodes a month. We're going to be independent, totally nonpartisan. We'll be a national forum for discussing the latest developments and trends and issues in 4 core areas: pharmaceuticals and biologics, medical devices and diagnostics, foods and dietary supplements, and cosmetics and personal care products.
Of course, we'll also be discussing the overall direction of the agency, including what to expect from the new administration. If you subscribe, you'll also get bonus episodes when there's breaking news. And there should be quite a bit of breaking news, right, Wayne?
Absolutely. This is going to be an exciting time for FDA. We're going to have to wait and see almost on a daily basis as to what's going on. In our first episode, we focused on the pharma space. We had 2 great guests. In this episode, we also have 2 great guests, and we're going to focus on medical devices.
But first, let's get to some headlines.
First, from the pharma desk, accelerated approval for drugs. Companies often seek accelerated approval status for their new drugs. This new guidance updates agency policies and procedures on accelerated approvals for drugs and biologics. The guidance addresses several key topics: how FDA determines which products are candidates for accelerated approval, the standards of FDA for granting accelerated approval, such as post-marketing requirements, the procedures for withdrawing an approved product. This draft guidance is largely consistent with the guidance that FDA issued 10 years ago in 2014, but you really ought to check out the new guidance to understand what's been clarified or revised. And I would expect us to see a lot of activity in the accelerated approval area in the next administration as we have new leadership coming in at the top of the agency. From the device desk, FDA recently published a report on the risks and benefits to health of non-device software functions. The report was issued just last month in December, and it highlights the FDA's Digital Health Center of Excellence and their findings on the 5 software functions that were excluded from the device definition in the 21st Century Cures Act. These functions range from software that offers administrative support to a healthcare facility, to software that helps patients maintain a healthy lifestyle, but is unrelated to the prevention or treatment of diseases. The analysis includes information from experts who work outside of FDA, who are external to FDA, and also peer-reviewed literature, adverse event reports, and the like. And I would urge, again, you to look at that if you're interested not only in software functions for non-devices, but also just generally for AI, because it affects the use of AI to a certain extent as we move forward.
Thanks, Wayne. From the foods desk, USDA and FDA, that's U.S. Department of Agriculture and FDA, announced a joint request for information on food date labeling. And so here, the food labeling request for information includes the use of terms such as sell by, use by, and best by. This has been kind of up for debate for a very long time. And so the RFI is really seeking information on industry practices and preferences for date labeling, research results on consumer perceptions of date labeling, and really any impact that date labeling may have on food waste and grocery costs. Here's what the RFI is trying to find out. It's trying to find out which products contain date labels and what criteria are used to decide what phrase to use and what date to include, and really how consumers are interpreting date label information. For food products, it's not currently mandatory, but if it is on the label, then it has to be truthful and an accurate depiction of what the use by or sell by date really is. The RFI is really also trying to find out whether consumers are confused by the current information, especially if they believe the dates determine whether food is safe, when in fact it really indicates quality, and that's again been a big issue over the years. So date labeling can be confusing, and really this RFI is another attempt to deal with some of these problematic issues. From the cosmetics desk, FDA updates guidance for industry on registration and listing of cosmetic product facilities and products. Late last year, the FDA recently issued updated guidance called Guidance for Industry, Registration and Listing of Cosmetic Product Facilities and Products, updating frequently asked questions and answers in Appendix B. And the FDA provides 3 new FAQs for comment purposes. The agency has advised the comment period on the 3 FAQs closes January 13th. But the new FAQs really address kind of deeper, responsibilities of a U.S. agent, situations when one FEI number may be associated with multiple buildings that manufacture or process cosmetic products, and product listings for free samples and gifts. The guidance, as with all guidance, is intended to assist stakeholders with requirements for cosmetic product facility registration and listing submissions to the FDA, particularly since this is still a newer model that the FDA is trying to implement with mandatory cosmetic registration. And so the guidance is intended to assist in describing who is responsible for making the registration listing, what information to include, how to submit, when to submit, and addresses also registration and listing exemptions. Now, Wayne, let's meet our incredible guest.
Okay, well, one guest today is Neil O'Flaherty. Neil is a partner and head of the medical device practice group at Amin Wasserman Gurnani, a law firm. He has more than 34 years of legal experience representing medical device clients, and he works with clients in all stages of pre-marketing and commercial life cycle. Neil, welcome to FDA Watch. As you know, this is our second podcast, so you're early in the game. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor.
Thanks, Neil. Also joining us today is John Sawyer. John is with Realistic Quality Solutions. He is a medical device expert in quality management systems and regulatory affairs. His current work has been establishing and improving quality systems and regulatory strategies for various modalities based on FDA's QSR, ISO 13485, EU, MDR, and others. He has spent time with firms both domestically and internationally. Welcome to FDA Watch, John.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, let's go to the first discussion point. There's a lot to discuss when it comes to medical devices and diagnostics, but let's start with an overarching issue, and that has to do with the administration coming in. The new administration's nominee for commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins. He's a surgeon. He certainly uses medical devices in the ORs. So of all the product categories that FDA regulates, medical devices may be the one that he has the best understanding of. But Neil, my question is, even if Makary is not nominated, whoever the next commissioner is, what should be his or her top priority when it comes to medical devices? And if it is Makary, what do you think his top priorities will be?
Well, it's interesting. I think he's an interesting character. He has already in the past shown a willingness to align views with RFK Jr., who's up for Secretary of HHS. So I could definitely see him being a team player and a conduit between HHS to kind of drive what the administration's agenda is for HHS and FDA. One thing that I'm keeping an eye on, and it'll be interesting to see what occurs, is what's going to happen with the laboratory developed tests rule. This was an issue in the first Trump administration where um, they basically tried to take FDA's authority away for LDTs, and that was reinstated with the Biden administration. The Biden administration was still interested in being open to the idea of more active regulation of LDTs. So I think it'll be interesting to see if the Trump administration again tries to step in and limit FDA's authority over LDTs, either by possibly revoking the final rule that's in place, or maybe looking to a Republican Congress to step in and limit FDA's ability to regulate in that area. So, and I think Makari could be a conduit for those administration issues. I think high priority for him. I think should be, if he's in, is working with industry on getting more clarity on digital health products going forward. I think the agency's been doing a good job in that regard. It's a difficult area because these are types of medical devices that evolve iteratively, and it's the type of thing where there's changes that occur post market often, and what's the best way to come up with a scheme to evaluate the safety and effectiveness. So I would hope that would be a focus of the new commissioner and the administration.
Thanks. John, do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I think from a medical device manufacturing perspective, everybody's really nervous right now. They're starting to see that there are people within the agency, both at a higher level as well as, if you want to say, a current level, that they're announcing their retirements or exits from FDA by the end of the year. So they're looking forward to what's it going to cost them as manufacturers. When this happened before, it turned out that industry ended up doing a lot of training of FDA personnel that really didn't have an understanding of whether it was a guidance document or regulations and how to apply it. And so it was like the manufacturers basically had to say, in some cases, time out, that's not the way things have been done, et cetera, et cetera. So I think going forward, some of these people that are coming in may be considered to be novices in their areas. And so I think it's going to have a big impact on what the medical device manufacturers are going to have to do to get their products cleared and or to navigate through this as some of these people are, if you want to say, ramping and coming up to speed.
So do you expect there to be delays, inevitable delays in the review of applications moving forward based on what you just said, and that is people need to be trained? What's the impact on companies there, and what should companies do about it?
In some cases, what they need to try to do is anticipate questions ahead of time, i.e., get an idea of, especially as you say, for clearances, if now somebody within the Office of Device Evaluation is new to them, they haven't dealt with this individual before, is try to have as much upfront conversations to try to clear any concerns or questions they may have to stop a potential delay. Don't know if that's going to be effective, but they got to start thinking out of the box as far as what additional information or questions should they be trying to take off the table early enough so it doesn't affect their approval process or clearance process.
John, do you think that, I mean, a couple of things, either like a, more uptick in pre-submissions and 513G's, request for information, maybe also more build in on time, instead of a company trying to clear like a 510K in 2 to 3 months, it's maybe kind of giving a bit more of a cushion on timeline. Do you think that, overestimating maybe at least 3 to 6 to 7 months might be better to build in addition to those pre-submission meetings with the FDA?
Yeah, most definitely. I think they're going to have to factor in a buffer, whatever they believe that buffer is going to
Right,
be.
right, yeah.
And they build that buffer, and then they see what happens with the individuals that they are working with. But most definitely, I think they're going to have to make better use of pre-submission meetings and 513G requests to clear some of this off the table before they actually get into the evaluation part.
Neil, what are you telling your clients about this issue in terms of possible delays and new staff at FDA? Just to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think I'm aligned with John on that thinking. I mean, what I'm actually seeing, even under the best of circumstances with seasoned people in reviewing divisions, is it's often not the case that you can do a pre-submission, get written feedback, have your meeting, and then go on to a 510K. Oftentimes you have multiple rounds in the pre-submission process itself with supplements to actually get to a point where you feel like you have a comfort level and an actual plan where you're going to have success with your submission. I think some of it, goes to the complexity of the issues involved. I think sometimes I think FDA does the best they can, but I also think sometimes they're not as thorough as they could be in providing actionable feedback. And I think if there was an outflow of experienced people and an inflow of more inexperienced people filling those roles, I think that issue would only get magnified.
Neil, can I ask a question? I'm curious what you think about this. I mean, there's currently no FDA user fee for pre-subs. Do you think that if there is this, uptick in pre-submissions because of kind of the change up at FDA, that FDA could say, hey, we need to, propose some type of fee structure to manage it better? I mean, is that something?
Yeah, I think I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, Shelley, because I think the pre-submission process is a growing part of every reviewing division's workload. And I and in some cases, I think there's a problem with the amount of resources available to get through the pre-subs and the marketing applications, and so they could need more personnel in that regard, more resources to be able to handle it. Because, like I said, I mean, I have clients that go through 2, 3 rounds of an original pre-submission and supplements, and times that by the number of companies that are using the process. And I think it's really become more popular over the years. It just makes the workload grow.
Yeah. And as we know, in 2 years, but the user fees come up for renewal in 2025. We're going to be seeing the beginning of that process. Just a general question in terms of user fees. What areas might be looked at as part of that legislation? The PDUFA legislation always looks like a Christmas tree in that there's all sorts of stuff that's hung on. In the medical devices area, what needs to be addressed if there were legislative opportunity to do so?
I think obviously, the pre-submission area could be one that could be added into the mix. Right now there's not user fees associated with the IDE process, and so I think those two would be possible targets for additional user fees or categories for additional user fees.
Shelley?
Thanks, Wayne. So let's move on to a particularly vexing issue, which is cybersecurity. Now, this is a troubling issue for every industry, but in the life science and healthcare fields, it's especially problematic. John, what do you think is the future of device cybersecurity requirements?
I think it's just going to get increased across the board. And I think the area that's going to be most vulnerable is going to be the area of device manufacturers interfacing with the infrastructure where they connect to, whether it be a hospital, whether it be a clinic or a healthcare facility. Do they have the infrastructures to be able to handle and deal with it?
Yeah, no, I agree that, and that's interesting. Neil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an area that's of growing emphasis within CDRH. I'm especially with the passage of Section 524B and FDA's updates to its um, pre-market cybersecurity guidance document. The the definition of cyber device has become very, very broad. To the point where it can include the unintentional ability to connect to the internet. I've had clients, in this past year who have been uh, caught off guard with the fact that FDA would think that their device needed to comply with cybersecurity requirements and documentation requirements in their 510Ks, for instance. Um, so I think companies really have to understand how conservative FDA is being in applying cybersecurity requirements to devices and really plan that testing and documentation generation into their timeline and process for their marketing applications, because it can be quite the headache if you don't anticipate it and need to deal with it in the middle of a review cycle.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, Neil. And what do you think about AI in cybersecurity, like AI for, detecting threats, um, and potential breaches? Um, how would that kind of help and harm? I think FDA's regulation of cybersecurity. I think continuing to promote innovation, and addressing these threats without, of course, stifling advancement as well.
Yeah, so I think it's inevitable, right? I mean, AI has and will continue to make its way into the field. I think it has a potential complicating uh, factor in the sense that people are still getting used to the cybersecurity requirements especially in the pre-market arena. And then when you kind of overlay AI functionality, onto that, there could be a period of time where the what FDA's expectations are and what they are able to effectively communicate may not line up with what industry's hearing, and so that there could be some growing pains there, for sure.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, it's going to have to get better, especially from the standpoint of trying to detect the threats and how it's going to play out. And if you take a look at what's going on between FDA and the European Union, I think the European Union may have a little bit better handle with some of this through the AI regulation that they just issued in the past couple of months, and the fact that they're also endorsing that everybody take a look at ISO 27001 and how they apply it to their organizations, whether it's a healthcare facility or a manufacturer. I think what's really going to have to come out of this is if you look at what cybersecurity is out to do, people have got to understand how not only do they protect, say, the device and the software in the device, but how do they handle the infrastructure? So there's got to be clear rules for what are the requirements for a manufacturer, what are the requirements that got to deal with the software, but then what are the requirements that the IT groups have got to have to make sure that all of these things are connecting properly and one's not adversely affecting the other. So I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in defining roles and responsibilities.
Let me turn to one other topic, digital health. I'm excited by what we might be seeing in terms of digital health products. FDA is going to have to regulate these products. There are already a number of them on the market. Neil, let me turn to you first, and then to John. Looking to the future, what kind of regulations do you see coming out on digital health? How is FDA going to get a real handle from a regulatory standpoint on what really is an innovation in medical treatment?
Sure, sure. Well, just as an initial matter, I want to make a, a point to give FDA credit for what they did several years ago, when there was an explosion of digital health products and apps. And that is, they had the early realization that um, they weren't going to be able to apply traditional medical device controls to all of these products that technically met the statutory definition of a device. And so I thought they did a nice job in terms of articulating, what they would consider to be not a device, what they would consider to be a device or possibly a device, but they were going to exercise enforcement discretion, um, and and then what they were going to focus their active regulation on. I think that was a key step that FDA took. They didn't bite off more than they could chew, and they I think they set up a good approach in terms of having risk-based deliberations about what they wanted to actively regulate. Um, I think um, the challenge that FDA has with digital health uh, products is their how they develop over time, and it's an iterative process. It's not like you go into FDA and say, here's my finished device, and these are the specs, and FDA can clear that product as is. I mean, there might be some changes down the road, but with these with these digital health products, there's going to be that evolution on the on the post-market side, with great frequency compared to what you would get with a traditional medical device. And so how do you go about uh, evaluating safety and effectiveness while not putting too much of a damper on innovation, and the need for changes by having these companies cycle back for changes in the post market setting all the time. And I think that's really the direction that FDA's regulation of digital health needs to head. I think their pre-certification pilot program, while it turned out it's not going to be the ultimate model in this area, I think they learned a lot of useful information, about the types of things that need to be built into a review for these products. I think FDA is kind of doing the best they can now in terms of um, uh, using guidance documents in combination with existing medical device controls and law, to articulate what they want. The agency itself has said they would like to eventually see a kind of a new regulatory structure put in place for these type of products that focused on FDA evaluation of the safety and effectiveness of you know uh, changes that are going to occur and how they're going to be evaluated by companies, so the company doesn't have to come back. So I kind of see that as the focus for the agency going forward in that area.
Yeah. John?
For me, this is an exciting area. I deal a lot with clients that have digital health products. And I think to reinforce what Neil said, what FDA has done to try to deal and stay ahead of the game with respect to digital health has been, just from my perspective, fantastic. But this is an area when you actually see two fields coming together and overlapping. You have the digital health, the imaging, and then you have the cybersecurity overlapping, and they got to become integral to each other. When you take a look at what a lot of facilities, hospitals are doing, where you have images that are being sent from the hospital, from the diagnostic equipment to a PDA to a laptop, then sending it to the doctor's home office or sending it to a clinic. This information is just going crackers over all of these different viable options of where they can be and where they are going to go. And then it's like, what happens to those images? How do you protect them? How do you make sure they don't get compromised or there's no compression of the images going on that changes something? So it's fluid. And I think FDA is going to have to really closely work with industry and the manufacturers to really build in the infrastructure necessary to make these things available as quickly as they're needed, as well as protecting all of that information going forward. And again, some of that is driven, unfortunately, by the groups that have this information. Do they have the wherewithal to protect the images and to protect the people? From the standpoint, you may have a hospital that's pretty good, but what about the clinic? How are they going to be able to handle that? And so I think those are challenges that the FDA are going to have to deal with, about what happens in these different environments and how does this, what we do regulatory wise, affects these different environments. And I think that's something they're going to have to grapple with.
I want to ask you about GMPs. Good manufacturing practices and processes are important in the development of every medical product. In the device sector, we see the evolution of the quality system regulation, the transition to the ISO standard. That's clearly a front burner issue. I'm going to turn to you again, John, and then to Neil. What are your thoughts about this issue?
Sure. Harmonization has been something that in the industry we've talked about for years. So this is just one more step to try to get us to that part, that fact of harmonization, where we can have a standard that's applicable across the board. So I think it's going to get there, but I also think there are changes that are being discussed and proposed that could end up not allowing that harmonization to occur, to where more efforts are going to have to be taken to say, maybe in the future, change the regulation again to make it fit with what's going on across the board in industry, from both the FDA as well as ISO perspective. So TC 210, which is the committee for ISO 1345, is going to be starting their review in 2025 of what other changes they believe are pertinent to be made to that standard. And there are some discussions of things that they want to link or refer to other management type systems. So we're going to need to see what those recommendations are going to be and what impact it's going to have. But it's something that clearly we got to pay attention to between now and the time that the new regulation has come out. But again, it's supposed to bring us one step closer to harmonization, and I hope it does.
John, with that though, what do you think companies should be doing while that's still kind of being finalized by the agency, in terms of best practice?
I think what we need to be doing, and again, FDA has done a very good job of this as far as supporting these international committees with having FDA representation to address the different standards or whatever. Manufacturers really can't get involved in those discussions, but they also know who is the US counterpart on those committees. And I think as manufacturers, if this is something that we really believe is important to us, we should be reaching out to those US counterparts and making our thoughts known, as well as saying, as things come up and you need comments, allow us to comment and give you feedback from an industry perspective that'll help you as we're going through and finalizing updates and changes to these regulations.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
We're going to turn briefly to our resource link segment. In every podcast, we're going to provide you with some valuable links you might want to check out. So, Shelly, let's share them with our audience right now.
Thanks, Wayne. Will do. But I want to first point out that these links will be included on our website, fdawatch.net. That's fdawatch.net. So there's no need to write anything down.
So let's look first at our Pharma resource link. This is the link to our first headline today, the guidance document on accelerated approval and expedited program for patients with serious conditions. It was issued just last month in December, and we'll provide you with the link. It's well worth reading, even if you don't have an accelerated approval product, because it reflects FDA's thinking on this category of products. In terms of medical devices, we're offering the link to the MDMA comments to FDA on predetermined change control plans for medical devices. The comments in the draft guidance is the agency's first step toward implementing the predetermined change control framework for all device types. MDMA is confident that PCCPs can allow FDA and industry to deliver improved devices more efficiently to patients while ensuring that rigorous safety and effectiveness standards are upheld.
Thanks, Wayne. Moving on to our food resource link. So FDA posted a new video in the FDA in Your Day series. The video focuses on FDA's recent reorganization and makes specific mention of the work of the Office of Inspections and Investigations, and discusses the Unified Foods Program to help deal with, among other things, E. coli infections. Finally, the cosmetic resource link. The link is an article on the PCPC website, that's the Personal Care Products Council website, on counterfeit cosmetics. According to the article, there has been an uptick in the sale of counterfeit products, including counterfeit cosmetics on online and e-commerce platforms. The result? Unsuspecting consumers purchasing phony products, which may result in disappointment. However, the purchase and use of counterfeit cosmetics could also lead to devastating results such as allergic reactions, skin irritation, chemical burns, eye infections, and even more severe health issues. And on that note, Wayne, it's time to thank our incredible guests, Neil O'Flaherty and John Sawyer, for really just being so thoughtful and informative in this episode. We'd also like to thank our podcast creator and executive producer, Michael Levin Epstein, and our assistant producer, Sam Hoffmeister.
And Shelly, this is important. If you, any of our listeners, want to suggest a guest or be a guest on our podcast, or you want to be a marketing partner or a sponsor, or just comment on the show, you can contact us at info@fdawatch.net. I'm going to repeat that. Info, I-N-F-O, at fdawatch.net. And definitely check out our website, again, fdawatch.net. Finally, we'd appreciate it if you're so inclined to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It really, really does make a difference, not just to us personally, but to the podcast and to increase its credibility. And remember to follow us and to subscribe. That's the only way you can make sure you won't miss a single episode of FDA Watch.
Thanks, Wayne. And as we say at the end of every episode of FDA Watch, if you really want to watch what FDA is doing, listen to FDA Watch.